Wait, hold on. Did we just hear that Paris might actually be preparing 2,000 soldiers for Ukraine? I mean, that isn't just talk, right? Or some political statement. That sounds like a major, a fundamental escalation.
Yep.
And the Kremlin itself is calling it alarming right now. Welcome to the military point. Before we jump in, let us know in the comments. Where are you tuning in from? We genuinely love to know.
You really hit the key word there, alarming. Yeah, that single description kind of sets the stage for everything we need to look at today. We've got a whole stack of, well, critical statements coming out of Moscow just this week. And the goal for this deep dive is really to connect those dots for you, maybe go a bit beyond the headlines. We're covering quite a bit from these troop deployment fears, which sounds serious, to this kind of shocking halt in diplomatic talks, and even how Moscow seems to be, playing the global energy dynamics.
Okay, let's try and unpack this. Yeah, we absolutely have to start with that French troop claim.
Yeah.
It feels so specific. And it wasn't like leaked through some random news source, right? This came straight from the Russian intelligence service, the SVR.
Yeah.
They're the ones claiming Paris is actively getting 2,000 soldiers ready to actually go fight alongside Ukrainian forces. And when Dmitry Peskov, their spokesman, was asked about it, that word alarming,
Yeah.
that was his immediate reaction. Stark.
It was. And what's really fascinating, I think, is how the SVR seems to be taking something that's maybe a future possibility and framing it as an immediate, active, and very specific threat. Now, I mean, think about the messaging value there. France, well, they haven't offered an immediate comment, naturally, but, President Macron has talked before about this coalition of the willing, potentially sending forces, but their public stance, at least, has always been deployment only after the conflict ends, or maybe for specific training missions, that kind of thing.
Right. So if the SVR is putting this out there now, it's a huge leap. It's going from maybe someday for training to 2,000 combat troops right now.
It absolutely is. It shifts the whole conversation, doesn't it? From deterrence to, well, immediate engagement. So the strategic aim for Moscow in releasing this, whether it's a genuine leak or maybe more of a strategic narrative, it seems designed to really maximize fear in Europe, to ratchet up the military stakes across the continent. And why 2,000? It's big enough to sound significant, definitely gets attention, but maybe small enough to sound believable as some kind of initial preparatory move, which, raises a pretty important question for you listening. Is this a genuine signal? Is French policy about to shift dramatically? Or is this maybe more about psychological warfare, trying to force Paris to backtrack, maybe create deeper splits within NATO?
That number, 2,000, it definitely sticks in your head. But speaking of things being stalled, let's pivot a bit from the military threat narrative to the diplomatic front, because it just seems completely deadlocked right now. What's the Kremlin saying about why talks have paused?
Well, their line is pretty clear. They're putting the blame squarely on Kyiv. They're calling it a complete unwillingness to continue the negotiation process. It's a very public, very strong accusation, clearly designed to paint Moscow as, the side that's ready to talk even now, and Kyiv as the inflexible one.
Okay, but were there actual concrete proposals being discussed, or was this just Moscow saying, hey, we're willing to talk without much substance behind it?
Oh, according to Moscow, there were specific frameworks, yes. They claim they'd formally proposed moving ahead with 3 distinct working groups for talks. One on political affairs, one focused on military issues, and a third specifically on humanitarian concerns. And Moscow's narrative is basically that Kyiv just refused to respond to these specific proposals, didn't engage.
Wow, a non-response like that. It's basically a complete shutdown of the dialogue channel.
It really is. And if you sort of connect this to the bigger picture, the whole framework for any possible peace talks, even just the basic mechanisms for talking about having talks, it seems non-existent right now. The military situation on the ground is defining the political reality, it seems. And until that changes significantly, neither side looks willing to really engage in that kind of formal, structured dialogue Moscow says they proposed. Kyiv probably sees responding as legitimizing Moscow's current position, right? While Moscow is using the non-response to try and show Kyiv's supposed extremism to the rest of the world.
That definitely sets the stage for the next really intense point of accusation. And this one brings NATO members right into it, specifically Poland. We saw the Polish Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, making statements suggesting Ukraine has the right to strike Russian infrastructure throughout Europe.
Yeah, that phrase, throughout Europe, that really changed the temperature fast. The Kremlin's reaction was immediate and incredibly strong. Peskov labeled Tusk's comments outright as justifying terrorist acts.
Terrorist acts. I mean, that's a massive leap in diplomatic language, isn't it? You're going way beyond just disagreeing on policy. You're accusing them of supporting terrorism, fundamentally.
It's absolutely a calculated escalation. By using that specific label, justifying terrorist acts, Moscow is strategically trying to delegitimize that Polish-Ukrainian relationship, especially in the eyes of maybe more neutral countries, perhaps in the global south. It shifts the debate away from, say, national sovereignty towards international anti-terrorism efforts. It's a potent narrative tool.
And Peskov didn't stop there, did he? He used it as a chance to speak to the broader European leadership.
He did, yeah. He sort of issued this advice, suggesting European leaders should step back and really reflect. Reflect on why such a close alliance with Poland, a country Moscow is now claiming justifies terrorist attacks, is actually necessary for the EU's stability. It's a clear pressure tactic, calculated, aimed at fracturing European unity by using the most inflammatory language possible against a key NATO ally. But this rhetorical pressure, it's also being matched by pressure on actual physical choke points.
Okay. And that takes us right to that logistical flashpoint that always keeps people on edge in the Baltic region. Kaliningrad. Lithuanian President Gitanas Nausėda apparently threatened to halt communication lines between mainland Russia and its Kaliningrad enclave, given that those critical links pass right across Lithuanian territory.
Right. The Kaliningrad communication threat is uniquely sensitive because that territory is so geographically isolated. It completely relies on that narrow land corridor, the Suwalki Gap area, or sea and air links for everything, supplies, communication. So Moscow's response was absolutely firm. You could almost call it a red line statement. They stated they will ensure uninterrupted communications with Kaliningrad, calling it their integral part, a matter of sovereignty.
So basically, even just talking about threatening those communication lines is treated as an immediate, almost existential security issue for them.
Precisely. It really underscores the volatility there in the Baltic area. Any move, even just verbally threatening communication access, touches a core vulnerability in Russia's defense setup, that isolated exclave. Moscow has to guarantee that link, which is why Lithuania's president, even raising it publicly, instantly becomes a major regional flashpoint.
Okay, let's shift focus a bit now towards the economics of all this, because Moscow is clearly trying to apply leverage there too. When Peskov was asked about Europe's ongoing support for Ukraine, he had a pretty direct financial forecast ready for European citizens, didn't he? What was the bottom line for, the average taxpayer?
He essentially aimed straight for the domestic financial pressure points within Europe. He stated very clearly, if Europe chooses to continue supporting Ukraine at current levels, their taxpayers will have to pay longer and more, end quote. He warned that maintaining their current relationship with what he called the Kyiv regime means facing increased costs for years.
That's a direct attempt to link foreign policy decisions to the pain in people's wallets back home. Trying to stir up political unease within EU member states, maybe it really forces that question on the public. Are you personally prepared to keep carrying this economic burden?
That's exactly the political question Moscow seems intent on planting in the minds of European voters. And this focus on cost, it ties right into the bigger global energy chess game that's playing out. We know Washington has been pushing hard, trying to get countries, especially big buyers like China and India, to stop buying Russian oil and gas.
Right. So why are those sales still happening, despite all that immense geopolitical pressure? What's Russia's sales pitch to these huge economies?
Well, Peskov was pretty quick to detail what they see as their advantage, and it's apparently more than just offering discounts. He said Russia consistently offers high-quality energy resources at attractive prices. Standard stuff. But he also emphasized something else, that the product itself is strategically important, and that it remains highly competitive globally because of, quality and the sheer quantity they can provide. Ultimately, his message was, it's up to the customers. They'll choose who offers the better, more reliable deal.
So it shifts the narrative away from their evading sanctions towards they're just being pragmatic market players. And we have a prime example of that logic working, apparently, with Hungary.
We do, yeah. Peskov specifically praised the Hungarian Prime Minister, Viktor Orban, for, as he put it, actively defending his country's interests. He pointed to the Russian energy supply to Hungary as being highly competitive because of that key mix. Better quality, larger available amounts, and lower prices compared to other international options. It kind of showcases the economic strategy they believe is working for them. Competitive pricing, high quality, reliability. They think that will consistently beat geopolitical pressure when it comes to vital resources.
Okay, shifting gears one more time here. We need to touch on these new strategic alignments happening. Moscow definitely seems to be expanding its partnerships quite dramatically. President Putin recently met with North Korea's foreign minister, Cho Son-hui. What was the main agenda for that high-level meeting?
According to the readout, the discussion was explicitly centered on plans for the further development and strengthening of friendship, partnership, and strategic alliances between Russia and North Korea. This isn't just, casual diplomatic chat. It's a very clear signal about wanting to build a robust new strategic relationship, designed presumably to counterbalance existing global power structures.
And what does a partnership like that really offer Moscow right now beyond just showing geopolitical solidarity?
Well, potentially several things. First, obvious opportunities for military technical cooperation, which could be crucial given the ongoing conflict. Second, it might provide an avenue for navigating or even evading international sanctions, leveraging North Korea's unique economic situation. And third, it sends a strong message globally that Moscow feels it has significant strategic alternatives and is actively pivoting towards partners outside the Western sphere. It confirms that shift in global dynamics they keep talking about.
So does this mean we should expect Kim Jong-un to visit Moscow soon to sort of cement these new ties?
Well, when asked directly about a potential visit by Kim Jong-un, Peskov was deliberately vague, almost cagey. He simply said, "At present, we have nothing to report on this subject." And that strategic ambiguity, that silence, is itself a kind of message, isn't it? By keeping quiet, they keep everyone guessing about just how deep and how fast this partnership is developing. It maximizes the perceived threat, the instability this new alliance introduces.
Wow. Okay, so if we step back and look at everything we've just unpacked, from those really specific French troop claims and that incredibly inflammatory language about Poland justifying terrorist acts, to the economic pressure being put directly on European taxpayers, and then finally these new, quite robust-sounding alliances with countries like North Korea. It really feels like Moscow is running a very comprehensive, multi-layered strategy, military, diplomatic, economic, all at the same time.
Absolutely. I think that's the main takeaway here. Every public statement, every diplomatic move we've discussed seems designed to hit two related goals. First, to try and fracture Western cohesion, especially within the EU and NATO, create divisions. And second, to demonstrate undeniable global strength. To show they have viable alternatives, whether it's competitively priced energy or new strategic partners like North Korea alternatives to Western markets and alliances. So if this sophisticated, multi-front approach is their strategy, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What's the single greatest structural weakness the Kremlin believes the West possesses? What vulnerability allows them to apply this kind of pressure so effectively across so many fronts? That's maybe something for you to mull over, to explore on your own as you process all these developments.
That is a deeply unsettling question to end on. You've been listening to The Military Point. Stay sharp, stay informed, and we'll catch you next time.